Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transport Focus webinar. We won't get started just yet because we'll wait as we've got a lot of people coming along today, and we'll wait until a few more have popped in. See people still joining, so just give it another minute. Okay, hopefully most people have joined now, and anyone who joins in a minute can catch up as they do. So welcome everyone to this Transport Focus webinar supporting great bus journeys. I'm Louise Collins, Director at Transport Focus. I'm going to chair this webinar today. So just to let you know that this call, the call is recorded so that people can watch it afterwards. So I hope that's okay with everyone. I'm not going to speak for more than a minute now, but just to briefly cover the agenda. So today we're going to hear from some Transport Focus colleagues who are going to set the context first of all by reminding us, I guess, about what the Your Bus Journey survey is. So we've probably got people on this call who are really active participants in Your Bus Journey who are using the survey already in their areas and might know a lot, but we know we've probably also got some people who are newer or who are thinking of joining the survey. So we'll provide that little bit of background. And we'll remind people about the results from 2024 because that helps as we move on to talk about the interim results for 2025. That helps see where we came from at the end of last year. And really, we're going to focus most of the webinar on how we use the survey results to drive improvements. So we're going to talk about the key driver analysis, which we'll explain more about later, but the things that are really important to passengers and how you can use that in a practical way to identify priorities in your area. And then we're going to hear from Warrington Borough Council, also focusing on that kind of using the survey and hear some like the kind of practical side of what's it like to use the survey in an area and how does that actually kind of work in reality. So a really interesting agenda. There's going to be some time at the end for questions. We're going to keep them all to the end rather than asking them individually to speakers as we go. So please do put your questions into the chat and we'll pick them up and hopefully we can have a good conversation. Now, when we've done these webinars before, it's been great to get the chat going, and I've noticed that people have helped each other out by answering questions. So sometimes if someone's got a query, someone from another area has something really interesting to say on that or passes details on. So do use that chat. It's a really good way to get the best out of this time. Okay, so I'm going to go straight over to our first speaker now. We're going to hear from Sarah Schmaterly. She's our Insight and Evidence Manager at Transport Focus, involved in the Your Bus Journey survey, and she's going to give us a recap of the survey and talk about the 2024 results. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Louise. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Schmeiterli, and I'll be taking us through the first part of today's webinar. So let's begin with a quick reminder of what Your Bus Journey is and why it matters. This is a Transport Focus flagship survey. It's a measure of passenger satisfaction across England, Scotland, and Wales. It captures detailed local level insight into how people actually experience bus travel, from punctuality and cleanliness to information, value for money, and feelings of safety. The survey helps local authorities, operators, and the government understand what's actually working and what improvements can be made and are most needed. Yes, staying on this slide. So how does your bus journey actually work? We survey passengers throughout the year, approaching them face to face during their journey, either on the bus stop or on board the bus. Then they complete a short questionnaire, either online or on paper, about the journey they've just made. It's important to highlight that this is a representative survey, meaning the results reflect the full diversity of not only passengers, but also the routes and the journey types. Responses are typically weighted to match real-world travel patterns and the demographics as well. We focus on verified journeys. That means real recent trips. So feedback is based on immediate recall, not vague impressions of, a bus trip that they had last week. It's what they're doing today at this moment. And because we collect quantitative ratings and open-ended comments, we can look at the big picture and the trends while also zooming in on specific experiences of different cohorts, like young passengers, disabled passengers, and those traveling on or off peak times. And finally, your bus journey is designed to be independent, consistent, and comparable over time, providing robust evidence and tracking change and benchmarking performance. Next slide, please. In terms of scale, the survey continues to grow year on year. So in 2024, your bus journey covered over 290 local authority areas, involving responses from passengers traveling on more than 3,000 routes. Together, these represent about 75% of all passenger journeys in England outside of London, as well as all Scottish regional transport partnerships and Welsh regions. So this breadth gives us one of the most comprehensive and inclusive data sets on passenger experience anywhere in Great Britain, really. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. Looking back at last year's results, the headline is that satisfaction remains high, but there is still room to go further. In 2024, overall journey satisfaction across Britain stood at 86%, up from 80% in 2023. So really, there is a positive story here, and there is a lot of improvement. Next slide, please. When we break it down by nation, satisfaction was highest in England at 86%, followed closely by Scotland and Wales. This consistency across nations suggests that while there are regional nuances, passengers generally have a positive experience when using the bus, so that's a really good thing. However, when we look at for example, when we look at within England, we start to see more variation. Satisfaction tends to be slightly higher in rural and smaller urban areas, while reliability and comfort are often better, and slightly lower in larger metropolitan areas where issues such as congestion, punctuality can have a greater impact. Next slide, please. We also see differences between passenger groups. So older passengers and regular commuters often report higher satisfaction, while younger or occasional users can be more critical, particularly around value for money and service information. So understanding these group differences is really key for targeting improvements effectively. Next slide, please. Comparing year-on-year results, we've seen improvements across almost all journey measures, especially around punctuality and perceived value for money. That's in 2024. These gains likely reflect probably the impact of the fare cap and greater local authority investment in reliable improvements. Next slide, please. And then when we analyze what really drives positive experiences, three things stand out again and again: punctuality, journey times, and the driver. In our qualitative feedback, passengers consistently highlight moments like friendly or helpful drivers that make their day, buses leaving and arriving on time, and smooth and direct journeys. You can see a couple of quotes on the slides. These kinds of real passenger stories help us bring the data to life, and they remind us that satisfaction isn't just abstract, it's shaped by everyday interactions and the small details that define a great journey. So that was a quick recap and overview from me of how the survey works and what last year's data is showing us. So I'll now hand over to my colleague, Becky. Thank you all.
Thank you
Sarah.
so much, Sarah. Sorry, Louise. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. So for the rest of much of this webinar, I'll give you a little bit of a sort of preview, if you like, on where those same results are heading in 2025, because we're halfway through the year. Well, we're further than halfway through the year now, but we've got results for up to halfway through the year. And then, as Louise said at the beginning, I'll focus more on what you can do with these results when you receive them. So firstly, just a bit of a sneak preview, if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. We're just showing a couple of our key measures. There's obviously absolutely loads of data behind the scenes, but just a couple of highlights from the interim results for 2025 so far. I do stress it's interim. Things could change a little bit by the end of the year, but this is giving us a really good sense of the direction of where things are heading. So first of all, if you just look at the left-hand side here, this is our overall journey satisfaction measure, and we're looking at the percentage of people who say that they were very or fairly satisfied with their journey. So as Sarah was just saying a moment ago, we had really strong high levels of satisfaction in 2024, and that had been a small improvement on what we had in 2023. And you can see so far in 2025, things are looking up a little bit further again in terms of overall satisfaction, certainly in Scotland, and just a little tiny bit in England as well. So kind of really holding strong on those great results that we had in 2024 in terms of overall journey satisfaction. And actually, when we look at most of our kind of key measures, so bus stop, the bus driver, punctuality in particular, they're all showing a similar kind of trend. So really positive news, it looks like, for 2025 so far. The one area that is different to that is, as you can see on the right hand side of the chart here, is the satisfaction people have with the value for money of their journey. So this is their perception of value for money, of course. And as you can see, in England in particular, it looks like for 2025 we're going to have lower levels of satisfaction on value for money. Now, we as Transport Focus are intending to do quite a lot of work to understand this in more detail as we get more data through the rest of the year. So we will be investigating that fully, but the kind of early signs are that it's not to do with the quality of service having deteriorated. As I just said, all of our other metrics are similar to that overall journey satisfaction measure. It looks like they're all holding reasonably strong at a sort of national level. But it looks like it's about the absolute cost of fares. So the change that we've seen to fare caps in particular does look like that's having an impact. That's not, as you can see there, being reflected so strongly in Scotland at the moment. So we'll see what continues with that. And that will be really interesting to kind of pick apart what the differences are there and see if there's any learnings for us going forwards. That's just a bit of a sneak peek. And as I said, things could still change by the end of the year, but this is a good indication of where things are heading. So if we could move along to the next slide. As I said, for the rest of this webinar, we'll focus on, so what do you do when you receive these results at the end of 2025 or, in 2026 if you're not taking part at the moment. If we just move on to the next slide, we've just got a couple of quotes here from previous participants in the survey, and the CPT is one of our stakeholders, of course, as to how they see the results from your bus journey survey being used. So we'll just pick out a couple of things from the quote there on the left-hand side from the CPT. I think it's important to note, as they have here, that there are some areas that perform really, really strongly. You know, overall satisfaction is quite high overall. Yes, there's room for improvement, but it is quite high, and there are some areas that are really strong. So there's definitely things that other authorities can learn from those, and that's part of the point of webinars and other sessions like this, so that we can kind of share ideas and hopefully learn from each other to improve for passengers overall. So that's one point. And then the other thing I'll just mention here, this is one of our local authorities that's taken part in the past, talking about how they use the Your Bus Journey survey results to help decision making, to help direct what interventions might be made and how to use different types of funding. They're talking about BSIP here, but other authorities might be thinking of different types of funding as well. And also, as they've made the point here, they share these results with the operators in their area so that they can take really practical steps as well, based on this survey as evidence as to what the issues or challenges or even areas to be celebrated are. So that's just a couple of examples of how others are using the results already, and we'll hear from Michelle at Warrington Borough Council in a little while as well about some of the things that they've been doing with the survey results in particular. But one particular area that we wanted to highlight to you today, thank you, is using the key driver analysis. So this survey is big. It's got lots and lots of data points, lots of questions that we ask, and then we're really conscious that there's loads of information in there, and we want to help you to be able to kind of pinpoint which bits of it are most important, which matters most to passengers, and how can you use that to kind of direct your funding and resources and your time in the most useful way. So we run a key driver analysis, which helps to identify key points in the survey which are most important to passengers. So very, very briefly on the next slide, I'll just explain what this analysis is. Now, if anyone is interested in the kind of technical analysis behind this, I'm really, really happy to talk about it offline. But for the purposes of today, I'll just say we have 22 individual ratings questions in the survey, so where people rate their satisfaction with bus stop, bus driver, all sorts of things. And we first of all make that more manageable by theming them into these 9 areas that we're showing here on the slide. And then once we've got those 9 themes within the survey, we then look at how the responses on those particular themes are associated with the overall journey satisfaction measure, and from that we can determine, okay, which of these has a stronger relationship? Is it punctuality? Is it the comfort on board the bus? And therefore you can infer, okay, if we can improve punctuality, can we improve overall journey satisfaction, or is it more important to improve how the drivers are rated, and will that make a bigger difference to overall journey satisfaction? So that's kind of the purpose of the analysis, and as I say, I can talk about the technicalities for anyone who's interested separately. So what we're going to do here is just kind of walk through an example of what you might do when you receive your results and you receive the key driver analysis, and how you might use all of this information. So we're going to focus on one example area that took part in the survey in 2024. I'll keep them anonymous, but I will just say it's not actually Warrington, but it is another urban area. So it's a town in England. So this is the output from our key driver analysis for this particular urban area. And what we're showing here, these circles kind of represent the relative strength of relationship that each of these things has with overall journey satisfaction. So that means on the top row of circles here, you can see that the bigger circles are things that have a stronger relationship with overall satisfaction, and if you can improve those things, you're more likely to get an improvement to overall journey satisfaction. So very clearly for this area, the priorities for passengers and the things that you need to focus on most are number 1, journey length. You can see that's slightly bigger, and number 2, punctuality. And then you can see the others relatively from there. And I'm just going to talk a little bit today about journey length and punctuality, the bus driver, because that's the next one. And then the other one that stands out to us and is interesting, we think, here is the bus stop, the green one, sort of halfway along. And the reason for that is because we also have in the second row of circles there the same analysis that we've done against the people who say they were very satisfied with their journey overall. So the top line is people who were very or fairly satisfied, and the bottom row is the people who were really very satisfied. So it's more like what makes a great journey rather than a good journey. So that's why we're interested in the bus stop in this particular case. So I will go through a few of the things that you might do now, knowing that punctuality and journey length and the driver and the bus stop in particular are all really important. And what we would suggest that you as a local authority would do next is to say, OK, let's gather all of the evidence we have and all of the knowledge we have about punctuality, what might be affecting it and what might be affecting journey length, and look at where we might have things that are going well and not so well, and kind of think a bit more about what exactly it is that we need to improve upon to affect the overall journey experience. So if we can go on to the next slide. I'll firstly just give a bit of context. So this particular urban area, you can see just a snapshot of some of their results from 2024. And you can see that actually slightly bucking that trend that we saw for the England average, this area had dropped satisfaction back a little bit. So that top row there is that overall journey satisfaction. It had dropped from 82% from 85%. And you can see I've just picked out those areas that we've just identified as being especially of interest. And actually you can see that the bus stop, people's satisfaction with the bus stop hadn't changed an awful lot, but a lot of these other really, really important areas had all slipped back. So in particular, kind of people's perception of the length of time that the journey took. And we've just seen that that's really important for overall journey satisfaction. So that's a key one to kind of focus on. And if you just click again for me. Thank you. We've also got here just the comparison that this area has with the kind of average for all other similar urban areas, and also for all of England. And you can see that actually in this area, all of these measures are just a little bit below the sort of urban average. And again, in particular, I think I would pick out the length of time that the journey took. People a bit less satisfied than they could be in this type of area. So if we move on again, we're going to look at some of the other things in the survey that are related to punctuality and journey length in particular, to try and diagnose what's going on here a little bit further, and hopefully therefore make it easier to work out what to do about this. So first of all, here we've got a question where we ask people, was your journey delayed by any of these things? And you can see that in this area, no surprise, because we've just seen that punctuality had dropped. In this area, the percentage of people saying that they were delayed has gone up from 27 to 43%. And it's particularly from roadworks and congestion or traffic jams. And we just highlighted that with the red circle, because you can also see that those things in particular are pretty high compared to the average for other urban areas. So, you know, I think we all appreciate this is pretty difficult to address, and it's a really big challenge, and it's not something that bus operators in particular often have control over, but it's definitely something that we need to acknowledge, and any interventions that can help towards these kind of things are obviously going to be key in an area like this where it's clearly a big challenge here. That's just one part of it. If we move on to the next slide, you can also look at things in the survey to understand kind of where punctuality is struggling most, or when it's struggling most, or for whom it's struggling most, to trying to, you know, pinpoint particular places or times or people that you can work with to help improve even the perception of punctuality as well as the reality of punctuality. So in this case, our example area is the blue one, and we've got the blue bars, sorry, and urban average, just to give us an indication, like a benchmark, is the pink bars. So if we start off over on the left hand side, you can see this little graph here shows that punctuality in this area, satisfaction with punctuality in this urban area, is particularly poor in the more village areas within that total local authority area. So you can see there 66% of people who started their journey in a village were satisfied with the punctuality, and that's lower than other types of area within this local authority area, but it's also particularly much lower than you'd expect in this type of local authority area overall. So actually, that was slightly surprising to me. I would have thought that it's normally the cities and town centre parts of the area that would be most affected by things like congestion, which we've just seen as an issue. But here that looks a bit different. So if this was your area, I would you would probably have some knowledge about what's going on here, and be able to think, oh, okay, you know, it's this particular road, or it's this particular network of roads that's causing an issue, and hopefully be able to go into a bit more detail with that then. Similar kind of idea we've done in the middle chart here, looked at the time of day that people were travelling. And you can see that the AM and PM peak times tend to be where satisfaction is a little bit lower with punctuality, both in this area and in other urban areas, and that's probably to be expected to some degree. But the thing that really stood out to us looking at this one was in this example area, punctuality is lower than you would expect at the weekends. So, you know, there's potentially something else going on at the weekends in this area, in addition, that maybe you can look at. So these are kind of all little things that hopefully, if you are this local authority area, you can start to think, okay, we can just improve that one small area of punctuality in that place or at that time, and that will, you know, all add up to improving things for passengers overall. And the last thing I'll just mention on here is the right-hand side chart there. You can see that we've done the same analysis again, looked at satisfaction with punctuality amongst people who said that they had RTI at the bus stop that they started at, or not. And you can see that there's a little bit of a difference. You tend to have slightly higher satisfaction with punctuality when there's RTI at stops, and I think that's just because it alters people's perception of how long they're having to wait and how sort of difficult that feels for them. So that's one to consider. Before we move on, I'll just say quickly, this information, this kind of analysis here, is done using our data hub. So this is not stuff that you would have seen mostly in your reports that you get from us, but we have our online data hub where you and anyone else, it's public, can go in and do all this type of analysis to your heart's content, or you can ask us for help with that as much as you need. So there's absolutely loads of scope to really dig into the data in lots of different ways. These are just a few examples. Okay, we'll just move on to the next slide, and I just want to pick up on that information point. So we saw just now that punctuality, sometimes the perception of punctuality is a little bit stronger if people have information about what's going on with their bus via RTI. And in this area, this urban area, I just wanted to highlight that this is also something where they're a little bit behind compared to other areas of a similar type, and indeed behind the sort of all England average. So you can see there in the middle, 34% of passengers in this urban area said that there was electronic information at their bus stop, and that compares to at least sort of half in other urban areas. So it's quite low, and that's not the only thing here. You know, we've also got lower presence of things like seating and shelters at bus stops. So that's all going to be affecting how people are feeling when they're waiting for their bus, if they've just got fewer facilities in this area, and that's probably likely to be affecting how they feel about how long it's taking their bus to turn up. It's going to affect their sort of overall perception of punctuality and overall journey satisfaction as well. So these are kind of all adding up to the overall perception idea. Okay, move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And the last thing I just want to talk about in terms of these big themes around journey length and punctuality is to look at, as Sarah was saying earlier, the more sort of qualitative feedback that we get in the survey as well. So I looked through a lot of the verbatim comments that we get from passengers in this particular urban area again, and there were two themes that really stood out to me. One was the number of people who were talking about how long the buses waited at stops along the journey. So after they've got on the bus, then as they're moving towards their destination, a lot of people were saying that the buses were, as it says here, stays too much on almost every stop. Ultimately, to this person, it feels like it's wasting time. So that's obviously, I mean, I'm inferring this, but I think that's going to impact that perception of how long the journeys take in this area. And that might be for very good reasons. It might be for, you know, timetable regulation. It might be necessary for bus drivers to stop and wait at bus stops, but these passengers are not perceiving that in that way. And it might be as simple as making an announcement on board the bus to explain why we're waiting at this stop. That would probably help. So all of this stuff, all of this, the quantitative survey responses, and also these kind of qualitative comments that people make can all be used to help sort of diagnose what's going on with this perception of how long the journey is taking and the punctuality and everything else as well. And you can use all of this to help improve the service for passengers. And the other point, as you can see here, the other thing that really stood out to me was the number of people in this particular area talking about how crowded the buses were. There was quite a lot of comments about this for this area, more than I've seen in other areas. So it's clearly a bit of a feature of this area. And again, this is an inference, but that would suggest to me that's another thing that's making these journeys feel longer than they want them to be. You know, if you're not feeling comfortable on the bus because it's crowded, any kind of long journey feeling is going to be exacerbated by that. It's always worth looking at those as well. All right, I will ask Colette just to skip on a couple of slides. Yeah, here, thank you. The other thing I said that we were interested in this particular area was how important the bus driver was. So as we've just done with kind of journey length and punctuality, you can pull together all of the other information in the survey that relates to the bus driver to help diagnose what's going on there and whether you can make any improvements to people's perceptions of the bus driver. So here we've got a kind of breakdown of other metrics that we have on the survey that are related to the bus driver. And actually all of these in this urban area are pretty high, so like 90%, high 80% in that full year 2024 column there. And they're not dissimilar to the England average. So I think overall, things like the helpfulness of the driver, it doesn't look like there's a huge problem. I'm sure there's always spots that can be improved, but it's not a huge problem. But the one that sort of stands out to us on this one is the bottom one that we've circled, where only about 3/4 of people were satisfied with how smooth the driving was. And that's dropped back from 2023 as well, and it's a little bit lower than the England average and the urban average as well. So that's probably the one to perhaps focus on. And the reason I'm saying this is because there's 2 points here. That could be an issue with how drivers are driving, or obviously it could be the vehicles. So that would be up to you, or the quality of the roads, or whatever it could be. That would be up to you to sort of pinpoint exactly what needs to be changed here. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because just looking at that headline metric of how satisfied people are with the drivers might be masking the fact that it's actually potentially about the vehicles or the road surfaces and things like that. So it's worth kind of digging into all of this in a little bit more detail. And the other point I just wanted to make here is that, as I said, there's some quite high numbers here, and some areas have even stronger results on the drivers. And I think it can be worth kind of sharing those kind of things back with those staff to show, you know, this is something that people are appreciating, and you know, it's really it makes a difference to people. It's one of the key drivers, for example. So yeah, sharing back and kind of feeding back to drivers that they're doing a good job where they are is no harm in doing that. And just to kind of reiterate that point, we've got here some more verbatim comments from people who were either satisfied in the green or dissatisfied in the red with the driver specifically, and these comments are just sort of saying why that might be. So there's a lot of, I'll let you read these and we can share these slides afterwards, but there's a lot of stuff in here about kind of showing empathy, and showing understanding, and showing some humanity, that kind of thing. So where you've got positive comments, I think that's can be worth sharing with the drivers, and learning from the more negative ones where they exist. I'm aware that I've spoken very fast, so if there are questions we can talk about them afterwards, but I'm keen to let Michelle have a chance to speak as well, and hear about how Warrington has been using the survey results a little bit.
Thanks, Becky, and that was incredibly interesting. And just I've been working with this survey for years, and there's detail in there that I didn't realise we could get. So, for example, looking at the type of area we're boarded isn't something that I knew that we could break down, and it was interesting how it creates that picture overall, isn't it? So, and lots of you on this call will have recently received your interim results deck, so just worth thinking, isn't it, about how you can go beyond those headline slides that we're sharing with you, and there's much more detail available to you. We really do want you to get the best out of the survey. So if you've got any questions now, put them in the chat and Becky can answer them at the end. We are going to share the presentation afterwards, of course. So now we are going to move on, and we're going to hear from Michelle. So it's Michelle Hoddy, who's the public transport team leader at Warrington Borough Council, one of the most improved areas in the Your Bus Journey survey between 2023 and 2024. So over to you. Thanks, Michelle.
Morning, everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. The following slides that we're going to be seeing will show the comparisons between the 23 and 24 on how we've improved within WBC initially. And they're based on the Your Bus Journey results. Although not all the changes for the better were made solely based on the key driver analysis, these did focus our attention on where to put our resources and our money for many of the improvements that we made. Colette, could you move to slide 3, please? Thank you. Because the slides have got numerous points on that show the comparisons, I won't go through all of them because otherwise we're going to be here all day, but we'll pick out 1 or 2 off each one. On this one, because the increase, we've had a 12% increase on the length of journey. Now, those journeys, obviously, they haven't changed in length. So as it was mentioned before, it's passenger perception of those journeys, and I believe that's due to the bus priority schemes that we've been introducing throughout the borough, bus gates, for example, and bus only routes going through. We're actually installing one of the bus lanes at the moment. It's an extension of one that has been there for some years, but we're now extending it further. It goes from the north to the south on one of the main routes on the A49 in Warrington. We're not reducing the size of the road for other road users. We're widening it. So we've still got the 2 lanes on the dual carriageway for traffic coming in, but we're going to have that additional bus lane. Because of where Warrington's situated, surrounded by various motorways, we've also got swing bridges over canals. If anything happens on those motorways, Warrington is the diversionary route for a lot of people getting off the motorways, which can make it congested. So by putting these schemes in, we're hopefully bypassing the main congestion so buses can keep moving and keep that flow going. Could I have the next slide, please, Colette? On this one, I'll pick out the actual at the stops where we've we've increased passenger satisfaction by we've actually changed the shelters this over the last year or two. For the last 18 months, we've gone under a new contract, so we've got brand new shelters. They're a lot brighter, a lot more open. We're also, the information that's being provided, we've got brighter and bolder adverts that promote the buses with links on that, so people can get to websites that's got more information on, maybe regarding fares or timetable information for other services. We've got QR codes now that link in, that go to our websites as well for more information. The new shelter provider is exceptional. When we get in touch with them and say we've got damage, they're very quick at responding to get out there, get that damage repaired, or cleaned if it's got something to do with it, you know, graffiti or dirt or anything like that. They're very quick at responding. So I think all that has helped to go towards the satisfaction for at the stops. Slide 5. For ease of boarding, we've had a new bus fleet now for the main operator in Warrington, which is Warrington's own buses, and they've got low floor buses. We're increasing the number of raised curbs throughout the borough at the stops. So every time the surfacing works or anything, the bus stops are included in on that surfacing works, and raised curbs are added. So the majority, if not all, of the buses now have the ability to drop at the curbs as well, so that it makes it easier for people to get on and off without necessarily needing a ramp to use if they're wheelchair users or if they've got prams, etc. Slide 6. As I've just mentioned, the main operator in Warrington is Warrington's own buses. We were fortunate enough to be able to secure funding from central government through the zero emission bus regional areas known as ZEBRA. And due to that funding, we've been able to replace the whole fleet to fully electric now. Which means the buses themselves, obviously, because they're new buses, they're cleaner, they're more comfortable. They've got things like USB charging, they've got video screens on to show the route as it's travelling along. There's audio announcements. So I think the fact that we've got this new fleet has enabled the satisfaction to move up from that side of things. I think I've covered that one really with the slide 6. If we can move on to slide 8, please, Colette. Thank you. As it was mentioned earlier, it's important the way that the drivers are with customers and the customers' perception of how the drivers are with them. We actually have an enhanced partnership meeting with all operators in the borough, which we meet every 2 months or so. So we feed back the information regarding drivers and cleanliness of buses and things like that back to the operators in those meetings. From that, they can then improve how they do training with the drivers, whether it's pulling in nearer to the stops or a friendly hello can be a big difference in how passengers perceive the satisfaction actually on the bus. Warrington's own buses actually, after seeing the results from 2024, they actually booked 3 rooms at the local rugby ground, and they had external companies coming in to train drivers on more on passenger focus. So how you react to passengers, what passengers require, you know, hitting all the sort of things really that passengers brought up to give to the driver, so they're more aware for when they're out there doing their job to increase that further. Next slide, please, Claire. Sorry, could I go to the next slide actually? Is it slide 9? Right. One of the things that we also mentioned was the cost of the bus fare. Warrington has actually had a fare cap of £2 per adult and £1 per child. So where it's gone up in the actual value of travel, that'll be down to the fact that we've had this fare cap that Warrington's council has been subsidising. That's going to be carrying on to at least to the end of December this year, and then decisions will be made further. Now, although for Warrington between 23 and 24, there's a lot of improvement there that we've done based on the results from the 23. If we look at the results compared with other urban areas, although we've increased on a couple of things, we're still struggling on some of the others to compare. For example, the driver satisfaction, as I mentioned earlier, actually scored lower. Although it increased in our own, it scored lower in comparison with other areas. So it's one of the reasons why this training was set up at the rugby ground, to try and improve in that area. Could I have the next slide, please, Claire? This is just showing that we're classed with 18 others in the urban other category for the actual rating of what we do. Next slide, please. So to summarise, although we fell behind in regards to information, etc., going forward at the bus stops, because you can see there, although we've made improvements, we're still below the urban average. So this year, to work on that, we're installing brand new bus stop flags throughout the whole of the borough, which is slowly being rolled out from this year. That they'll have a QR code and more information. The QR code will take you again to websites that give more information on timetables and if there's any issues with bus services, if they've had to divert and things like that, to keep people up to date from the stop. We're also procuring RTPI for all the shelters in the borough, and then eventually moving to e-ink timetables, because whenever there's changes, inevitably there's going to be delays in the old data being transferred to the new data. So going forward, we're hoping that by getting these e-ink timetables, this can be updated in the office, press of a button and out it goes and changes. And we're hoping that by bringing these things in, it'll move us up into the top 10. So we'll see, but we're not sitting back on our laurels. We're taking into account what the results are, and we're doing our best to improve and move on from there. And I think that's it, really. Is there another slide after that, or is that the last one? Yeah, that's the last one. Thanks very much, Colette.
Thanks, Michelle. So I found that fascinating, and you've done a huge amount of work. You've been very modest about it because you have made significant improvements. But I think it's great how open you've been about the work there still is to do as well. And in this sort of forum where people are, all facing similar challenges, it's really good to hear that from you. I'm particularly interested in the e-ink timetables, actually, which I saw at some sort of like conference a couple of years ago and thought how amazing they were. But a lot of authorities were saying they were prohibitively expensive. So but hopefully the investment in that does pay as part of that quality offering, and it will be interesting for your results and for others. People in similar positions, aren't they, how your fare cap alongside all the quality improvements will kind of be, impact passenger satisfaction this year. So yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Michelle. So we're going to go on to questions now. And I'm going to start actually, Michelle, I'm afraid I'm back over to you with a question from our Chief Executive, Alex Robertson. And he's asked whether you have a sense or any way of evaluating which bus priority interventions were the most cost effective, sorry.
I don't know personally, I'll be honest. I was asked to do this yesterday, so there's a lot that I'm still picking up on and learning with that side of things. But I can certainly, if anybody wants to ask a question I can't answer, if they can put the details in there, and then I can find out that information and get back to you.
That's fine. Thanks, Michelle. And it is interesting, isn't it? Because there are some big ticket items, which, they're very expensive, aren't they? And then there are some things that are smaller incremental measures, don't cost so much, but easy to do, less disruptive. If we did across the industry have a sense of which ones were having the most impact, that would be really useful. And, other people on the call might have views on that as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to a couple of other questions here. So the one that I actually want to pick up, it's for Becky that I'm going to go to from Donalyn Morris. So the survey's got a number of questions related to whether the vehicle's EV, low or zero emission. Do we know whether it's something that passengers take any notice of? Do people say that they're more likely to use a bus because of its environmental credentials?
We do ask that, actually. Yes, we say we ask them, did they notice what type of bus it was, whether it was petrol or diesel or hybrid or fully electric, or frankly, a lot of people don't know, but we ask that question. And then if it was an electric bus, we ask whether that matters to how important that is to them. And a lot of people do say that it matters, it's important to them, but we also ask whether it makes any difference to whether they would travel by bus, and it does for some people, but I haven't got the figures in front of me, but it doesn't, for most people, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference to whether or not they will travel by bus, but they do say it's important to them. So I think it's something that perhaps makes people feel better about travelling by bus, but maybe doesn't make a practical difference.
Yeah, and that's backed up, isn't it, Becky, by other research that Transport Focus have done previously, where we've looked into people's motivations, and generally, like say, it's a sort of nice to have rather than a motivating factor, but maybe something people would miss or feel the lack of if it wasn't available to them. I'm going to go on to ask you, Becky, again to talk a little bit about the data hub. So we've had a couple of questions in there, and there was one in there from Chris Buck about a data hub login and what that gave you. But I actually wonder, is it worth just very briefly explaining the difference between the data hub and the portal, and also picking up within that, because there was another question about the data and when it's released and how big the data set is, just explaining sort of the phasing of those results.
Sure. So there's two of these sort of online outputs, if you like. So the data hub is our completely public facing data hub, which is on our website, and actually we've got our other surveys on there as well. So the strategic road user survey that we do, and other ones as well. So anyone in the public can log on and look at kind of either sort of slide type of outputs, or you can do lots of advanced analysis, like the stuff that I was doing as part of this presentation in there. As I say, anyone can do that, and that's available at the end of the year when everything is published. And the question about having a login, any member of the public can look at that website and play with it. But if you request a login, we can give you a little bit more access to playing around with the data in more detail. And the reason we do that separation is just because we want to make sure that the data is used responsibly and people aren't running lots of analysis on tiny sample sizes, for example. So we kind of restrict that. But if we give you a login, you'll have a bit more flexibility with things like that. So that's the data hub. And then the other online deliverable that we have is something that's only available to participants in the survey. So the local authorities who are funding their portion of the survey have access to what we call our portal dashboard, and that is updated with more sort of live results about once a month throughout the year. So as Sarah said right at the beginning, we're surveying right from sort of February time through to December, and from 2026 we'll start in April and it will run through the whole financial year. Our online portal allows the participating local authorities to see their own results and not everybody else's, just kind of month on month. You can sort of see where your results are heading for the year. And then we also have, as we've been referring to here, our interim survey results, which we don't publish, but we're sharing them with everybody in the industry, and they are the sort of halfway through the year point to give everybody a sense of where things are going.
Thanks very much, Becky. And there's a huge amount of detailed information there, isn't there? So and I see, Hannah, you've put a question in about being a participant but not being aware of the portal and wanting a link. So if you use our Your Bus Journey email address, just to drop your details across, we'll make sure we get back to you on that. And you've suggested as well that it could be a good idea to have a webinar. We have done those before on the Data Hub, and I think it's well worth us doing one again. So maybe we could cover the Data Hub and the data portal and have that in the next in these series. Okay, so we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think it might be useful for people if I just explain where we're up to in terms of the survey for 2026 and the plans. And Becky and David, you can chip in if I miss things on this. So one thing to say for people who are already participating, as well as people who might be considering, is that we are planning to start the survey fieldwork in April 2026 rather than in February. A few reasons behind that, and we've contacted most of you individually, but it aligns better with other reporting cycles. It seems to work better for most people. That's the decision that we've taken. If that causes you any individual problem, then we can chat about what that means and how we can help you with that. We have written out to all authorities who currently participate in the survey to let them know about hopefully joining in again for 2026. We haven't quite been able to confirm final costs as we have in previous years because we're waiting on final confirmation ourselves about funding. We normally put in a small contribution to help with the costs, and we plan to do that again this year if we can do. And we've done the same to authorities who aren't currently in the survey but might want to take part, so to let you know more information about it and what the potential costs could be. So it would be really great if everyone could at least reply to those emails and tell us what they're thinking. So if you know what you're doing, if you're not sure, if you want to chat more, then do let us know. Becky, David, is there anything that I've missed on that we would be useful to share on the call?
I don't think so. It's just a matter of understanding where people are at. We have asked for an indication in principle, and we'll give more details when we have it. So we understand that people may still need to think that through. But as you say, please do come back to us. Let us know where you're at. And if you want further discussion, we're only too happy to help.
Yeah, great. Thanks, David. Okay, so we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you to all our speakers, Michelle particularly for joining us from Warrington, and for jumping in at a short notice to do that. We really appreciate it. And to Becky and Sarah as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.